Hello, my friends. Let's continue our conversation on Stoicism. We were going through the letters on ethics by Seneca, and last week we did letter number one. I actually want to remain consistent in this one, just go on to number two. Letter two. So, from Seneca to Lucilius. Greetings. From your letter and from what I hear, I am becoming quite hopeful about you. You are not disquieting yourself by running about from place to place. Thrashing around in that way indicates a mind in poor health. In my view, the first sign of a settled mind is that it can stay in one place and spend time with itself. Be careful, though, about your reading in many authors and every type of book. It may be that there is something wayward and unstable in it. You must stay with a limited number of writers and be fed by them if you mean to derive anything that will dwell reliably with you. One who is everywhere is nowhere. Those who travel all the time find that they have many places to stay but no friendships. The same thing necessarily happens to those who do not become intimate with any one author, but let everything rush right through them. Food does not benefit or become part of the body when it is eaten and immediately expelled. Nothing impedes healing as much as frequent change of medications. A wound does not close up when one is always trying out different dressings on it. A seedling that is transplanted repeatedly will never grow strong. Nothing, in fact, is of such utility that it benefits us merely in passing. A large number of books puts a strain on a person. So, since you cannot read everything you have, it is sufficient to have only the amount you can read. Quote, "But I want to read different books at different times," unquote, you say. The person of delicate digestion nibbles at this and that. When the diet is too varied, though, the food does not nourish, but only upsets the stomach. So read always from authors of proven worth, and if ever you are inclined to turn aside to others, return afterward to the previous ones. Obtain each day some aid against poverty, something against death, and likewise against other calamities. And when you have moved rapidly through many topics, select one to ponder that day and digest. This is what I do as well, seizing on some item from among several things I have read. Today it is this, which I found in Epicurus, for it is my custom to cross even into the other camp, not as a deserter, but as a spy. Cheerful poverty is an honorable thing. Indeed, it is not poverty if it is cheerful. The pauper is not the person who has too little, but the one who desires more. What does it matter how much is stashed away in his strong box or his warehouses, how much he has in livestock or in interest income, if he hangs on another's possessions, computing not what has been gained, but what there is yet to gain? Do you ask what is the limit of wealth? Having what one needs, first of all. Then, having enough. Farewell. Another fun one, I think. So, the first point that I find interesting is what he says about authors and not trying to read everything all at once or too many things from too many different sources, but to try and read something from a couple of sources. I don't know if at an intellectual level I fully agree with that. I think it can be very helpful to read a breadth of things, different authors, different viewpoints, different types of books. But having said that, I do feel that I understand what he's trying to say. I think that a lot of people, and I think this is a very common human thing that maybe you've experienced too. I've experienced that myself, for sure. That we sometimes feel that we have read, say, one book on something, and then we feel that we're kind of an expert. And I come back to, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't have it in front of me, but Neil deGrasse Tyson's quote, "The most dangerous thing in the world is thinking that you understand a topic well enough to believe that you're right, but actually not understanding that topic well enough to realize that you are wrong." And I think that this is something where we often, well, not maybe not often, but I think this is something where a lot of people end up. They believe that they are experts, even though in reality they're not. And that ties into me to not just the reading of multiple sources, but also what he says. So read always from authors of proven worth. Now, what's an author of proven worth? I don't know. There's a pandemic out there. One might expect that people who do peer-reviewed publishing work in scientific journals know what they're talking about. One might expect that a professor of epidemiology or virology knows what they're talking about when they address issues surrounding a pandemic, for example. But not everybody agrees, because some people think that because they've watched a Facebook video on a virus, they understand better how that virus works than a full professor of virology. So in those cases, I think what we often forget, what people often forget, is that there are differences in quality of different sources of work, right? And when you ignore that, you can lose track of things, topics, material that's actually very important. One author is not the same as another author. One author has more qualities, better qualities than another author. And that doesn't just extend to viruses, that also extends to other things, right? Many other topics. Some people are actual experts. Other people claim to be experts, but are not. Some people are not experts at all. They just believe they are. And learning to distinguish between all those things is important. Now, from a Stoic viewpoint, I think you could again relate this a little bit to what we were talking about last week, which was focus on what you are doing. Focus on one thing, right? Stay in the present moment and the thought of the present moment. I also think that when it comes to this idea of reading a whole lot of things, what sometimes happens in people is that they understand a little bit about a lot of things. And although that can be interesting in its own regard, because I also have a lot of interest, I understand that, I can sympathize with that, but the problem with that is that you don't really know that much about that thing. You just know a little bit, and that's okay. But then accept that you only know a little bit and not a lot about that topic. The final thing is, you see here something that I have mentioned when I introduced Seneca. You see that he quotes Epicurus. Again, if there is any massive difference between two schools of philosophies, between the Stoics and the Epicureans, they're really opposed in pretty much every way in how they approach life. So it's interesting the way he puts this. For it is my custom to cross even into the other camp, not as a deserter, but as a spy. And that I can relate to. Although then it seems that he's contradicting what he just said, because he just said stick to known authors, well then stick to the Stoic authors, but now he's going to Epicurus. Okay, anyway, having said that, cheerful poverty is an honorable thing. I think Johnny Cash, right? A Satisfied Mind, etc. It's very interesting what he writes here. The pauper is not the person who has too little, but the one who desires more. And that is very Stoic. By focusing on things that you want to have, but that may not be fully within your control, you will suffer. Because you cannot control whether or not you end up obtaining those things. It's not within your control. So, you suffer. Because you do want that thing, you long for that thing, but that's not up for you to decide. Up to you to decide whether you get that thing or not. It's not within your control. So that, I think, there he really comes back, maybe a bit obliquely, but he comes back to a very Stoic thought that you find in Epictetus, that you find in Marcus Aurelius. And that continues, right? What does it matter how much is stashed away in his strongbox or his warehouses, how much he has in livestock or in interest income, if he hangs on another's possessions, computing not what has been gained, but what there is yet to gain, right? if you're going after that of the property of other people, you are envious of what they own. Again, from a Stoic perspective, you set yourself up for suffering because that is theirs, not yours. It's not within your control to obtain what is rightfully someone else's. You may get some, but you may not get that all, or get all of it. And I think, again, that's a very important aspect of all this. So, do you ask what is the limit of wealth? Having what one needs, first of all, then having enough. If you have what you need, maybe that is really all you require, right? It's all you need. And maybe you don't need anything else beyond that. And if you can be satisfied with what you have, I think you've made massive strides in being a happier person, right? Being happy with what you have as opposed to what you might perhaps potentially one day eventually possess or not. That was letter number 2. I hope this was interesting. Let me know what you think of this letter, how you interpret it, what you think of these specific passages. And I shall be back again next week for more talk about Stoicism. Bye-bye.